Welcome back. Time now for your business news. Diesel prices are expected to increase for the fourth consecutive month. That's the expectation from the Automobile Association based on unaudited fuel data from the Central Energy Fund. Let's now speak to their spokesperson, Layton Beard, for more. Layton, thank you for your time. Before we get into the other expected increases, the increase in diesel price could have a detrimental effect on the current cost of living crisis, right? Because it affects food prices.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's going to impact on discretionary spending of consumers. It's going to hit consumers very hard. They're going to feel it at the toll. It might not be immediate, but it certainly will filter in. The expectation is that even basic foodstuffs will become a little bit more expensive because the input costs in that agricultural sector will have to increase to accommodate for these diesel increases, and they recover that through obviously higher prices that are charged at the toll. So yes. I mean, consumers across the board are going to feel the pinch. This is not something that is isolated to motorists. Everybody's going to feel it. And it comes, I fear, at a time when people are already very financially strapped. And it's just going to add a lot more stress to those budgets.
Yeah, and I mean, for instance, I always think of the Reserve Bank and how it will react after the petrol prices affect everything else. But of course, both 95 and 93 could also rise, and even paraffin as well. What are the reasons given for these increases?
Well, if you look at the data, the main driver behind this is international oil prices. In the case of petrol, around 30% of the reason for the increase is attributable to the weaker rand against the US dollar, so the rand-US dollar exchange rate, and the rest is attributable to the international oil price. So that gives you an indication, and that's obviously higher at the moment because many of the oil-producing countries have cut back on production, and that's pushing up the price. So that's the one reason. In the case of diesel, because it's such a significant increase above R1.50, up to 85% of the reason for that is because of the oil price, while the rest is obviously the rand-US dollar exchange rate. And that, based on those numbers, is exactly where we are now. And it's been the same for the last couple of increases. Really, the big issue there is those international oil prices, what we actually pay for the product. Yes, the value of our currency in terms of what we're offering to pay for it is contributing, but certainly the price that we're paying for the product is the main reason.
And I think when it comes to paraffin, for instance, in our context here, Layton, you always worry about, those in disadvantaged areas or situations that rely on paraffin.
Yeah. And I mean, in the case of paraffin going into October, we're looking at an increase of around R1.50. It may be a little less, maybe a little more, but it'll be in that ballpark. And you're absolutely correct, Maseka. I mean, when you talk about illuminating paraffin, it's used by the poorest of the poor. It's used for cooking, for heating, for lighting. So people rely on this. The heating aspect may be waning a bit as we go into spring. But cooking and lighting are very important, especially in the context of the blackouts that we have from Eskom.
Yes.
So people rely on that fuel to, just to see what's happening in their homes. And when that fuel becomes more expensive and the budgets are tighter and they decide not to use it, it is going to have a lifestyle impact. People are not obviously going to be able to cook maybe. They're going to be living in dark for longer. So those are very concerning aspects for the AA. And yes, I mean, again, another huge increase to that price of R1.50.
And of course, looking at the fact that we are nearing closer and closer to December, that's the festive season. A lot of people have planned holidays. Some of them will need to drive to those destinations. So a detrimental effect even there. It's going to be more expensive.
No, it will certainly be more. I mean, at the moment, it's definitely going to be more expensive, depending obviously on what the price does in November and obviously in December as well. But if it stays at the current levels of around 25 Rand a litre for petrol, it is going to make an impact on people's people's travel plans. When you combine this with the increases that we've seen over the last couple of months, you're adding another 4 Rand to a litre. Now, it may not seem like a lot initially, but if you add that up over, specifically a trip down to the coast, to either, to KwaZulu-Natal or to the Western Cape, and you multiply that by the kilometers and how that's going to impact on your usage, it's going to add up at the end of the day. And then you've obviously got to add in your your other expenses such as tolls and what have you. So it is going to certainly impact on those plans, which is exactly why, Maseko, we're saying to people, make sure your car is in a good condition, it's in good mechanical order, your tires are inflated correctly. Those are kind of the essentials you need to do just to ensure that you're using the optimal amount of fuel, not using more than you should because your car is in a bad condition.
Obviously, when you say that we'll have to see what happens in November and December, you're being optimistic, right? Because with this trajectory, what would you attribute a decrease to in November and December?
I mean, certainly, you're correct. The trend, specifically in the international oil prices, has been upwards. And if that trend continues, then obviously the outlook is negative. I mean, we are absolutely optimistic that, there would be some sort of a reprieve for local motorists. Well, and I say local motorists, but motorists around the world, consumers around the world are experiencing the exact same pressures as South Africans at the moment because of these international oil prices. This is not isolated to South Africa. I mean, obviously, if oil becomes cheaper, if that price eases and the rand strengthens against the US dollar, those are all very positive factors, and they will absolutely positively impact on the fuel price. It's one of those things where you have to wait and see how it plays out on a day-by-day basis. So we're nearing the end of September. We're almost there. The price for October is going to be adjusted, presumably on Monday, be announced on Monday, adjusted on Wednesday. And from then on, we need to see what's happening with those two factors. Hopefully, I mean, certainly our hope would be that they, begin a positive trend in terms of local users. But again, it's one of those things you have to monitor on a daily.
Thank you very much for your time. Layton Beard from the Automobile Association. And this time, at least when it comes to our government and its decision, it has nothing to do with what we've done. Like Layton said, it's international pressures. For instance, we found out just a few weeks ago that Russia has banned diesel and gasoline exports, and that will obviously affect the entire globe. Thank you, Layton, for your time. Now,